So sitting inside and just this artificial light all day and all night really is the bigger issue, really throws us off. And it's difficult for our bodies to understand, okay, what is daytime? When should our melatonin be turned off? When should we be circulating that melatonin again? Because we're constantly just giving ourselves cues that we should be awake and alert and the melatonin release should be off.
I gotta get myself a little more faith, a little more love.
I'm your host, Krista Bigler, and I'm going to guess we have at least one thing in common, that we're both in pursuit of a less stressed life. On this show, I'll be interviewing experts and sharing clinical pearls from my years of practice to support high-performing, health-savvy women in pursuit of abundance and a less stressed life. One of my beliefs is that we always have options for getting the results we want, so let's see what's out there together. Today on The Less Stress Life, I have Dr. Angela Holliday-Bell, who's a board-certified physician, certified sleep specialist, author, speaker, and founder of The Solution is Sleep. As someone who formerly suffered from insomnia herself, she understands the transformative power of good sleep and how obtaining this regularly can lead to a happier, healthier, and more productive life. She's been featured on local and international television shows and networks such as The Dr. Phil Show, ABC News, and WGN Television, spreading her message about the power of good sleep. Welcome to the show, Dr. Bell.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so let's talk about how you got into this niche, this area of health, because so often some of our greatest work it's because of our own struggles. Sometimes we have empathy. We have a lot more empathy if we've experienced that. So tell us a little bit about what happened with you that got you really into this topic.
Absolutely. So I am someone, I like to say, who's always had a deep, loving relationship with sleep. I was that person who was always asleep, or I did a lot of sleep and loved it until I started to go through our medical training. I am actually a board certified pediatrician by training. And as I went through medical school and residency specifically, sleep became much more difficult to come by. And it started with me seemingly not having time to sleep, but then became me not being able to sleep even when I had the time. And absolutely was one of the most frustrating and difficult experiences I've ever had in my life. There are all the training and all the other things that I've been through. So it started with my own journey just to fix my sleep. I started reading every single book there was on sleep, started to volunteer in the sleep clinic. And in that process, really fell in love with sleep and started to learn that it was more than just about feeling rested, that it was really critical to optimal performance in every facet of my life. And as I started to put the principles into place that I was learning, I saw my sleep change. I saw my life change for the better. And I knew that there were so many other people struggling from what I was seeing myself in clinic, from friends, from families. And so I knew I had to help other people do the same. And I decided to become certified as a sleep specialist, got trained in some cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, started my sleep consulting business, and now we're here.
Yeah, things have changed. What is the population that struggles with sleep? Isn't it like half the population?
Yeah, so statistically speaking, a third of U.S. adults suffer from chronic insufficient sleep. And that's just from the individuals who report having chronic insufficient sleep. I think the number is actually much higher than that. I've never walked into a room with more than one person, and there have not been at least one person struggling with sleep issues. So for sure, there are a lot of people, and the numbers are growing. So much so that all the way back in 2009, even before COVID, and things have worsened since then, the CDC deemed sleep deprivation to be a public health epidemic because so many people were suffering.
Yeah. And in your story, I see this with high achievers. You didn't have time to sleep. And then when it was time to sleep, you couldn't sleep. And it's a very human thing to be frustrated by what we cannot control suddenly, right? Like it was working and then it was not working. As you started to dive into some of the sleep research, was there anything that really struck you as oh my gosh, I have to change my life here? And what I'm thinking about is every once in a while, I run across a client who is very devoted to their work, very hard worker. I just had someone do this pretty recently, about a month ago. And I had someone a couple of years ago that would stay up at least 2 nights straight to do work. And that, yeah, I know. And it was, you can get away with things for a little bit. And what I remember about that particular person was that her brain was literally so broken. Like she was very hypersensitive. And so I just had someone recently telling me, I feel so good when I just work for 20 hours. And when I'm like really on a roll. I'm like, oh man, I'm having some PTSD about this conversation. And we know that sleep helps you repair overnight, but as you were digging into the research and falling in love with it, was there some specific things that really jumped out at you related to this? Because like you said, when you're training for a doctor, I do think for people that I know that have gone through this training is so rigorous. And
Yeah.
sleep it is literally such a way to ruin your health.
Yes.
But so I'm curious, what were some of those things that were like, oh my gosh, I have to make some shifts right now? Or what really struck you?
Yeah, so there were definitely some aha moments. I think what pushed me to the edge and what made me be like, okay, you need to figure this out is that I just absolutely became a worse version of myself. I was on edge all the time. I was stressed all the time. I felt like I was trying to learn so much, but none of the information was being retained. I had this constant brain fog and I had lack of energy. I didn't want to do things like work out and I didn't enjoy my leisure time. And so I became this kind of broken version of myself. And I was like, okay, before when I was sleeping, I was not like this. And now I am. And as I started to dig into the research surrounding sleep, I realized that all of that was a direct result of my sleep loss. And what really struck me was that initially I was sacrificing sleep because I wanted to be a good doctor, right? So I have to stay up because I have to study and I have to learn as much as I can. I have to be the super smart person. And then I realized that because of my lack of sleep, I was being a worse doctor. Like I wasn't being the doctor that I wanted to be because I wasn't investing in my sleep. And that's when it was like, oh, okay, you think you're doing it for this purpose, but you're actually doing the complete opposite. And so in order to be the empathetic person to my patients, to really learn what I wanted to learn, to retain the information, to affect my memory, my emotional intelligence, my ability to overcome stressors, I had to sleep. And so once I made that revelation, I was like, oh, okay, I've been doing this all wrong this whole time.
Yeah. Something else I think about with doctors that are working really hard, and I think about some of the symptoms you talked about. When you aren't getting sleep, of course, nothing is recovering, but especially adrenals. And adrenals are your organs that produce stress hormone. And so I'm wondering, did you do any testing on your early road with poor sleep that kind of started things?
Like testing, like lab work, you mean?
Yeah. Did you do some lab work or did you do any testing to see how your adrenals were functioning? Conventionally, we don't have a lot of testing, and that was not probably something that was talked about in training at all. So I'm just curious if you did any testing, if you just were able to jump straight to lifestyle.
Yeah, so no, I didn't do any testing at that point. For me, it was really the lifestyle changes that made the biggest difference. I did think about, I knew that I wasn't doing what I needed to do to get good sleep. So like when I talk to clients or people that I work with, they're like, I am going to sleep at the thing. I'm doing all these things and I am not getting good sleep, or I'm sleeping, but then I still feel horrible and I'm not rested. And it's okay. Is there something else going on? Is there a sleep disorder? Is there something affecting your sleep quality? For me, it started with, okay, let's do the things you need to do to actually try to obtain good sleep and then see where things go from there. So luckily, not that it was easy and it wasn't an overnight thing, but luckily once I started to put those practices into place, things really unfolded and changed for the better for me. I'm sure my cortisol levels are through the roof. I'm sure that every sleep is not great at the beginning of that, but I really focused on those lifestyle changes.
Yeah. Something I love to ask people is after you implemented changes, how long do you think it took to start to see results that were really quite measurable to you?
Oh, that's a great question. Because I was suffering with insomnia and chronic insomnia, meaning I had this broken relationship with sleep, right? So it wasn't just, oh, you're not going to bed on time. It started that way. I wasn't going to bed on time, not waking up at the same time. Sleep became a battle to me and it was wrought with anxiety. And I had to retrain my brain to establish a healthy relationship with sleep. That took a while. So I would say probably, honestly, 6 weeks to 2 months before I really started seeing some measurable improvements. And then definitely a solid like 3 to 4 months before I was like in a very good spot. And I continued to do all of the same things that I did to get to that spot to maintain that spot for sure. But it definitely wasn't an overnight thing.
Yeah. And that takes a lot of tenacity and grit to like charge through things for sure. Did you have a mentor or were you navigating it on your own?
Yeah, no, I navigated it on my own. I was just bootstrapping it. I think, unfortunately, in medicine, there is this mindset of just grind through it. You sleep when you die. You just have to keep working. Everything is about being a doctor and all these things. And I think that I would say one of the worst things you can do for your sleep and honestly for your health is become a doctor, unfortunately. We need doctors, it's important, but the way that we do it is just not great. And so there was no one around me who was like, oh, yeah, you need to sleep. No one was really saying that. But I knew for myself that that was important and I was suffering in that way. So it really was just my own doing of I've reached my wit's end and I have to change because I can't continue to exist in this way.
Yeah. I know we're going to talk about the 3 Ps, but when you say you had chronic insomnia, is there a way that is measured and fits in a black and white box? Or does it just look like I can only sleep half the night? Or what was your sleep pattern like?
Yeah, so the definition of chronic insomnia is difficulty falling asleep, maintaining sleep, or waking up earlier than intended, at least 3 nights per week for at least 3 months. So once it got to that point, it was like, okay, this is a chronic thing. And again, oftentimes it's more complicated than just not going to sleep. There are some maladaptive thoughts and behaviors that have progressed and occurred surrounding sleep. So for me, again, at first it was me not making time, me sacrificing sleep. But then it was like, okay, I'm tired and I need to sleep. And I would try to go to sleep. And then I would instantly be awake and anxious and tossing and turning for hours. And then I would fall asleep right before my alarm went off. And then I do it all over again. And then I started to dread sleep because I was like, oh, now it's going to be another battle and I'm going to go through this all over again. And there were days I'm like, I'm just going to go to sleep so early so that I'm in bed long enough that even if I get less sleep, it'll still be enough sleep. And that only made the problem worse. So it really started to be this point of contention for me, as opposed to this restorative process that I looked forward to. It was like a dragging, dreadful feeling that I had every night going to bed.
Yeah, that is tough. Thanks for that definition. So when you're helping others with sleep, there's a few frameworks that you use to try to make it a little bit easier. And one of them is the 3 Ps. Will you tell us about the 3 Ps for better sleep?
Yeah, the 3 Ps of better sleep. So this is just a simple, more bird's eye view of some things or some concepts surrounding sleep. That's a good way to just get started. When we tackle sleep issues, it can be such this big thing, right? There's so many things that affect your sleep, but it's helpful to break it down into at least these 3 parts to begin with. The first P, and I think the most important one, is to prioritize sleep. And it sounds so simple, but that is actually the part that most people miss out on. Even people who understand that they should get better sleep or want to get better sleep, what that looks like is I get up, I go to work, I come home, I take care of home duties, maybe childcare, spend time with my spouse, binge watch my favorite show, and then whatever time is left, I'm going to use that for sleep. And because I turn the lights off, I should just be able to go to sleep. And that is not prioritizing sleep. Sleep is actually a 24-hour process. So from the moment you wake up, you actually should be setting yourself up for a better sleep. And so I had to start my day with sleep in mind and being like, how am I going to set myself up for better sleep and not leave whatever time is left over when I'm done with everything else for sleep. So it's really a mindset shift that works wonders. And for some people, just that shift and like, okay, I need to set up my day and night for better sleep really makes a world of difference. The next key is to proactively manage daily stress and anxiety. So particularly as a resident and medical doctor, a lot of my sleep issues were related to stresses and anxieties that I was experiencing throughout my day and related to my sleep. And of course, we can't just make all the stresses of life go away. I wish we could, but there are things that we can do proactively to decrease the stress load we bring to bed with us, is what I call it. So anything that you do have control over during your day, something as simple as giving yourself more time for your morning routine so that you're not rushing and your cortisol is not surging first thing in the morning. If you have a commute that you're sitting in traffic and you're rushing to get to work, that can also start your day off on the wrong foot. So give yourself a little bit more time. Do something that you find enjoyable. Take breaks throughout your day. Sprinkle enjoyable things throughout your day so that you don't feel the need to sacrifice sleep in order to do it at night when everything else is done. And then managing your stress and anxiety before going to bed. So maybe that's making a worry list or a worry diary where you're jotting down all those things that you're thinking about so that it's out of your mind and processed before you go to bed. Doing a sleep meditation, listening to a sleep story, like giving your brain time to process those anxieties and thoughts, because they're not going to go away. They just will likely surface when there are no other distractions when you're trying to go to sleep. And then the last key is to protect the relationship between your bed and sleep. A lot of people don't recognize this as a problem, but it's a huge problem, and that your bed should be reserved for sleep and sex only. No other activities, including laying in bed for hours awake, tossing and turning. So one of the biggest mistakes that I made when I was struggling with insomnia was I'm just going to spend all the time in bed so there's a greater chance I would sleep. But what I was doing then was making a connection between being in bed awake, stressed, tossing and turning, as opposed to sleep. So that next time I got into bed, automatically that's what my brain went to, because this is what we do in bed. We're stressed, our cortisol levels go up, our fight or flight mode is triggered. And so I had to really break that relationship between stress and reconnect and reestablish a relationship between my bed and sleep.
I bet that was the one you found last, because I don't know, but I feel like it would be the one that you would overlook the easiest, right?
Absolutely.
Like you would think, oh, I'm fine. This isn't a problem. I think we're very unconscious of kind of consistent things that start to cause an effect, or this essentially neural pathway or the relationship you said, right? So you don't even recognize that was an issue. Since you came from working with children into really diving into sleep, I feel like everyone always has questions about kids. Is this part of your current career, sleep and issues with kids and sleep? Or what are some really common issues that kids have with sleep as well?
Yeah. So interestingly, I love working with kids in clinic and in my role as a pediatrician, not so much when it comes to sleeping kids, although I do still do some work with kids and sleep, mostly because a lot of kids' sleep comes down to the parents and the boundaries they've set around sleep, the behaviors that they've modeled around sleep, and the expectations that the kids have because of what the parents have done. Not all of it, but a lot of it comes down to that. So whenever I'm working, aside from a sleep disorder, right? So a lot of people don't realize that a lot more kids have sleep apnea, and mostly sleep apnea, but things like restless leg syndrome or sleep disorders, and people realize you think of it as an adult thing, but a lot of kids have it too. So that aside, often when I'm working on kids and sleep, it's more of the parents. Like it's me and the parents working together on how to establish a healthy bedtime routine, how to model healthy behaviors, how to establish boundaries, how to be consistent in those things, and how to teach them what to expect. So there are some aspects of that I still do work in, but most of my work when it comes to sleep is really in adults.
Yeah, I totally get it. Another thing that comes up with sleep is all of these tools that measure sleep data. But some people, and I think I agree, believe that if you already know your sleep sucks, then don't get a tool to tell you. So what's your thought on sleep gadgets and tools like that? What are some best practices?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person, right? So honestly, in my peak of insomnia, a sleep tool would have been horrible because it would have made me obsess over the numbers and my anxiety would have increased because now my score is 50 something and I'm trying to make it better and it's not working. And so if you are someone that already has this anxiety built up surrounding sleep, I typically actually don't recommend the wearables. For individuals who may not recognize some of their patterns that are contributing to their poor sleep, I think it can be super helpful to have this holistic view of your sleep, right? So some people may feel like, yeah, I keep a consistent schedule, but then you look at the wearables and it's actually you went to sleep 2 to 3 hours difference on the weekends versus the weekdays. That shows you. Or I've had clients who are like, I know that people told me or you told me that alcohol could affect my sleep, but it always made me sleepy. So I didn't think it was a thing until I saw that my sleep quality actually did suffer every single night. I had that nightcap or that glass of wine. Like pulling out those trends and showing people this mirror that they didn't see before, I think it can be super helpful. But I think if you already have this sleep anxiety built up, it can actually be a little bit worse.
Totally. I agree with you that I think it's really nice to like assess first and maybe even test and then get results. People, sometimes we put too much of our stake in the data. But to your point, I also maybe would not have realized the impact of late eating and alcohol on sleep if I had not seen it. Recently, this last weekend, I was on a retreat with a bunch of women and one girl was wearing a sleep tracking ring and someone asked me, do you have one? And I said, I had one for a while and I got what I needed from it and then it broke.
Yeah.
Good enough. I don't really need to continue to learn all those same lessons or obsess about it in a big deal. Is there anything that you're excited about in the realm of sleep as you look forward to the future? Do you think that we're making progress in certain areas? And something that came up recently in an interview was at-home sleep study test because sleep apnea doesn't always look like you think it should whatsoever. There's a lot of other oral mouth things and breathing pattern things that can impact it. And so I thought that was really interesting. I'm wondering if there's anything you're excited since you are hanging out in this corner of sleep so much.
Yeah, so I'm excited just about the prevalence of sleep talk and the education surrounding sleep. Even when I started as a sleep specialist, people were not trying to hear about sleep. Everyone was still on this, so like, why should I care? I'll sleep when I die type thing. And I've seen throughout my career that things have really shifted and people are starting to understand like, oh, wait, no, this sleep thing is important. Now, I do think that sleep trends unfortunately have worsened, but I think that people are starting to take notice on why it's important and looking for ways to make that better. Again, I think some of the technologies are great in that it is giving people access and empowering them in a certain way if used appropriately. So I think we still have some ways to go on that. But I think empowering people, even with, like you said, at-home sleep test, so it's not this whole daunting thing of having to go to the sleep lab and do sleep studies. And just talking about it, people asking my opinions about it, other things like that, I think that has been so great to see because it's a signal that people are starting to understand how crucially important it is, starting to take notice and wanting to make a change.
Yeah. Speaking of sleep trends getting worse, I'd love to hear about your thoughts around that. For me, I think that there's so much artificial light, and I know you talk about circadian exposure to light right away in the morning and then to see the sunset or to turn down the lights at night. But in general, artificial light destroys our melatonin production throughout the day, is how I understand it. Your thoughts, or what do you think about the continued worsening trends of sleep?
Yeah. So light is a huge one. And honestly, please hear me out when I say this world. I think remote work is great for so many reasons, but honestly, it has been a hit to sleep in a lot of ways, especially as it went throughout COVID. I think remote work can be great if done correctly in relation to sleep, but our body needs external cues, or zeitgebers is another word that we use for another term, to help us reinforce our circadian rhythm in a way that is important for peak alertness during the day and optimal sleep at night. And when we have a lack of a consistent schedule or a lack of movement or a lack of going outside, we lose some of those external cues. And so we have this free running schedule that makes it more difficult for sleep. Light is one of those. So sitting inside and just this artificial light all day and all night really is the bigger issue. Really throws us off, and it's difficult for our bodies to understand, okay, what is daytime? When should our melatonin be turned off? When should we be circulating that melatonin again? Because we're constantly just giving ourselves cues that we should be awake and alert and the melatonin release should be off. Something that people don't even understand is just normal room lighting. I try to get people to understand it's not just like bright. People think of like screens, right? Like, oh, my phone and my computer, that's a huge one. But sitting just in normal room lighting within a couple hours of your bedtime has been shown in research to delay your natural melatonin release by up to 90 minutes because you're still sending those cues. There is blue light in normal overhead lighting, especially LED lights, which is what most of us use now. So I think there definitely needs to be more education on circadian rhythms and external cues and light darkness and how that impacts sleep. And I think that's a huge reason that we're seeing some of these disruptions in sleep that we're seeing now.
Yeah. And a while back, I think it's probably a year ago, I finally had to add to all of my follow-up forms for clients, what is your sleep schedule? Because I will say, very intelligent people have many opportunities to improve sleep. Very intelligent people, right? So it's like overhead light. You don't know always what you don't know. And even though sometimes we swim in this information about light, it actually does really impact melatonin release. So if you are finding that you are not falling asleep, maybe start with the light things first. And I will say, the more severe the situation is, so the worse the sleep issues are, the more that person is impacted positively by circadian rhythm efforts very quickly.
Yes.
So,
yes, 100%.
So that's a positive thing. Is there anything you think we forgot to mention that you would love to mention? And then also, where can people find you online?
Yeah. So I think for me, the way that I approach sleep and sleep issues is often from a mindset perspective first. And we touched on some of this with prioritizing sleep. But I also try to get people to understand that they deserve to sleep. So it's not this thing that like, even if you feel like, yeah, I'm not prioritizing it and you understand that's not a thing you're doing, a lot of times people almost feel like they have to earn the right to sleep. So once I work enough, once I do this much, then I can sleep. And there's this guilt around sometimes sleeping. And I try to get people to understand that there's nothing you have to earn. By virtue of existing, you deserve to sleep. And we often wear so many hats and are doing so many things, but don't realize that just like I was being a worse doctor because I was sacrificing my sleep, you would be so much better in all of those roles that you play if you prioritize your sleep first. So you deserve to sleep. It's okay to do that. Do not feel guilty. And you will be better for it in all the other roles. So I really like people to understand that. But the best way to connect with me is probably through my website, thesolutionissleep.com. It has my socials there, a link to my book, Sleeping on the Job, and my contact information. So I'm always happy to connect and discuss further.
Yeah, I think you're the sleep provider for high achievers, right? Because I love that last comment. I find very frequently, this is something I've come to recently, is that worthiness is something that many people struggle with for a variety of reasons. And usually they're very high achieving people that struggle with that, right? That's why they're like climbing the ladder to try to find worthiness and achievement. Where as a person who has struggled with that a lot, I readily resonate with your comments there, as I have found that's a really beautiful sentiment to share an affirmation as well. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Just keep breaking.